morning, magicians. How are you? Welcome to today's Money Magic podcast. If you've just joined, my name is Vangile Makwakwa, and I'm a money trauma coach. So my guest with me today is Naomi. Naomi, welcome to today's podcast. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Vangile. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, please, can you tell us who you are as a soul and what you do?
Okay. Oh, that's such a fun question. It's not often asked like that. I love it. Okay. As a soul, I am an adventurer, a traveler, and a deep diver into life. I really, really want to explore life and find out about it at its deepest depths and its highest peaks. And as a professional, I guess it also goes along with who I am as a soul. I work with women who have issues with sex, like pain, or they can't orgasm, or they're numb, or something else is going on. And and I help them with that so that they can have pleasure and orgasm and juicy deliciousness in their lives.
Wow, I love this. You know, when you said as a soul, I want to explore the deepest depths and the peaks of life. I feel like that's such a beautiful description, and I resonate with that so deeply.
Yeah.
So, how do you come to do this work around sex and orgasm and helping women find pleasure in sex? Why is it important? Why do we care?
I think, I run free masterclasses every month, like free online little 1 hour classes for my women every month. And at one of them a few months ago, I said, so I think there were 50 women attending, and I said, so out of you all, who actually doesn't think sex is important, or doesn't think pleasure is important, or doesn't think orgasm is important, or thinks to themselves, like, why are we here? Why do we care? And honestly, out of the 50, I think 2 people went, yeah, me. And I was like, wow, like 48. So 96% of the women on the call were like, it really matters, even though for them it's like a difficult thing as well, because they've come to me because of issues with orgasm or sex or pleasure or pain or whatever their story is. And so I was really like, yeah, it really does matter. It matters for all of us. I actually honestly think it matters for all of us. It just depends on whether or not we kind of admit how much it matters, or how much it kind of like influences our choices or puts pressure on us to do certain things, or anything like that. And I came to this work because of my own story. So my own background is, I feel like I was a bit of a late bloomer in this, because I was about 34 when I finally went, you know what? I haven't orgasmed hardly ever forever. I've never orgasmed with a person. I'm heterosexual, so I've never orgasmed with a man. I was at that point, I'd been single for 8 years because the previous relationship had been so terrible that I'd had to do some really like intense recovery work for myself in that. And I finally went, oh, and sex hurts, by the way. The thing that I've been avoiding admitting to myself as truth is actually true, that it actually hurts when I have sex. Both with penetration and also pain with orgasm, which is a doozy for, those of you listening that if you've ever had pain with orgasm, that's a trip, because you're in the pleasure moment and then suddenly it's agony. So like that quick turnaround of the nervous system can be quite confusing and scary as well. And so I went into my own deep dive into, who am I? What do I want? What do I really care? And the answer was yes. And I started healing and really looking at who I was and what my stories around sex were and what my body was doing. And I came out the other side and I went, oh, okay. So now I need to talk some more about this. I need to actually stand on mountaintops and scream about this, because we need to know more about this. It's really important that we know.
Oh, this is a topic I'm very, very passionate about. I love having these discussions. I mean, I'm a Tantra yoga teacher, and I went into Tantra in my late 20s. I consider myself lucky. I actually found yoga, this work in my early 20s, and only became a coach way later, right? Because you first do it for yourself.
Of course.
But I found this work early, but I really also, this wasn't talked about. And I was reading and I was watching a documentary actually, because this is my favorite thing. My poor husband, he has to like sit through these things. And I'm like, you've got to watch, you've got to understand what women go through. It's just got like all these stats in his head about this. But I were watching this documentary, and it was really about female sexuality and just like how little research goes into female sexuality, how little funding is dedicated towards understanding anything to do with the womb, anything to do with female genitalia, whereas like there's like, I don't know, 80, like $4 billion or something goes towards erectile dysfunction and Viagra. It's so intense. So it's also very much an issue, and maybe I want to touch on this, right? About how does how do I call it? I want to say structural systems, or rather our systems in terms of patriarchy and sexism, play into women and orgasm and pleasure for us, and how do we then take it on unconsciously without even knowing it?
Oh, how many hours have you got? I mean, this is the big
Oh,
one,
my
right?
favorite topic. It is a constant topic in my household. So, guys, if you've ever wondered what it's like to be in a relationship with me,
This
now
is
you know.
it. I mean, I feel like this question is a really important one. It's a good place to start, because one thing is, we are all being constantly educated. We're all being constantly taught who we are and what to believe about ourselves. And this education that's coming towards us never stops to consider whether it's true for us or not. The education is just, it's teaching us. And what I mean by education is what you see reflected in social media or in the media, what you see reflected by your parents, what your parents and your teachers and your church and your friendship groups and everybody verbally tells you about yourself, what you read, you know, like we're constantly being told who we are in really subtle ways, and also really just overt, you are this thing ways, and in relationships as well. But we never stop and go, oh, am I? Am I that person? Like, am I? And the other issue with that is that we're usually being told one of two things. We're usually being told that we either are a good girl or we have to be a good girl in order to get praise or to get recognition or to be part of this society, or we're a slut or a whore and we're getting in trouble for expressing anything to do with our sexuality or anything that isn't good. It's like we've got the maiden and the Madonna, like that's it. That's all that women kind of have available to them. And so we have this coming at us from basically from birth as a female child, as an infant. And we have to try and work out who we are in amongst all of that. And I think for a lot of us, we never actually stop and go, is that really me? Like, is this good girl version of me who's like constantly thinking about everybody else's needs, who never speaks up when they have sex, who never goes, you know what, I need a little bit more foreplay than those 5 minutes that I just got, or who pretends to orgasm, which is another way of not speaking up, right? Or like any of these behaviors that we have when we're having sex with other people, just as example, it's because of what we've been taught to believe about ourselves. It's not natural. It's not who we are, but it's this really powerful imprint on us to behave in a certain way and to be a certain way and to not rock the boat. And we can see it as soon as somebody starts to like step out in different ways and like be a little bit more visible and a little bit more sexual, they start to get pointed at and they get frowned at. And I would say that it also goes in the opposite direction as well, because if you have a look at, you know, for example, the Cardi B's of this world, or like that kind of overt sexuality that's also displayed in social media, which isn't the maiden, but this like it's almost like an aggressive sexuality. That's also not real for most of us. Like for most of us, I think sexuality is actually something a little bit more precious and a little bit more inside and a little bit more contained than that kind of ferocious pushing out. But we've given these two options. And so I think for a lot, it's like, well, if I have the choice to either be the virginal figure in white, or if I have the choice to be kind of like the aggressive sexual one, maybe I'll try this other one on for size. But it's never coming from this place of it being like deeply inside of us and deeply true for us. And so one of the things I do with my clients is pretty much as soon as we start working together, I start asking them questions, and they have to do some homework and home journaling, which is like, what does sex mean to you? What does pleasure mean to you? What does pleasure feel like? What does orgasm feel like? Would it be okay if you orgasm and your partner doesn't orgasm? Would it be okay if you take 45 minutes to be fully aroused before anything is penetrated into your body? Like all of those kind of questions. And I think for a lot of women, it's like, oh, it's a really big deal to even consider that we can consider these things and choose from a place of this is who I am, rather than just going on with who we've been told to be.
Mm, mm. I was really intrigued when I learned, again, so grateful for Tantra and
Mm.
so many Tantra teachers that have been on my journey.
Mm-hmm.
When I learned that for women, it takes us 45 minutes or even an hour to get fully aroused and ready for sex, for penetration, sorry,
Yeah.
because all of us is sex, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know, nobody taught us how to ask for that. And so much of what we see about sex is from television,
Yeah.
because our sex education at school is focused on keeping us safe and safe from STDs. It's focused on keeping us safe from pregnancy at a young age, as opposed to also figuring out how to empower us.
Yeah.
So maybe let's have that conversation. How do you, as a woman who has now learned this information, and you've been in a relationship where it was like you learn from television, you go from 5 to 10 minutes and you're supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And you're thinking there's something wrong with you physically.
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation? How do you introduce it? And how do you feel empowered within yourself to own your body? I think that's actually the first question. How do you feel, how do you get to the point where you feel empowered enough to want pleasure for yourself before you can even talk about it to a partner?
Yeah. And I think that's also a really beautiful reframe, because that's the important bit. You know, it's like if we can't own it, if we can't respect it and love it and desire it, then what are we expecting other people to bring to us? You know, like life is a bit of a mirror and a bit of a reflection of our internal world comes towards us in our external world. And I would say for a lot of women, Vangile, it is a massive unpacking process of just stepping back and breathing and daily choosing that we have this worth and we have this power that's inside of us. You know, if you just think about orgasm alone, for example, we're taught like through languaging, he gave me an orgasm, she made me come, they did this thing, and then I did this thing, right? So it's always something outside of us is coming in towards us, and it's creating a response in our bodies. But the truth is that your body is the beginning of the response. It's your choice whether or not you're going to be having an orgasm. And that can be a subconscious and a conscious thing for all the women who are sitting there going, yes, but I'm choosing to have an orgasm and it's not working. Yeah, there can be subconscious things going on as well, right? But it's absolutely up to your body, your brain, your being, whether or not this pleasure is even going to switch on and start, let alone overflow. And so why are we giving the credit of this incredible pleasure, of these amazing orgasms, to the people and the things and the toys and the positions and the porn or whatever it is around us, instead of going, oh, it's actually all coming from me. It's my choice. This is my thing. And then the next thing is, you know, this piece around 25 to 45 minutes or more for full arousal for most women's bodies. One thing I know from working with women who have pelvic and sexual pain is that for a lot of them, they've never been fully aroused. Definitely never with another person, let alone with themselves and the way that they touch themselves. Especially not if we're going for the quick orgasm. Like I'm not, anyone who's heard me before knows that I'm not a massive fan of vibrators for various reasons. And one of the reasons is this, like, you can come in 3 minutes with a vibrator, right? Your tissues are not aroused. Your clitoris might have a peak kind of nervous system experience, but the rest of your body is not aroused in that moment, because 3 minutes isn't long enough. We're talking 45, right? And so if we're talking a situation with numbness or sexual shutdown or pain, and you can imagine that you've got these tissues in your genitals, like your vulvar tissues and your vaginal tissues and your G-spot and all of and your cervix, and they're not given enough time for the blood to fully fill them up, for them to get fully engorged and fully swollen, for the juices to start flowing, for the natural lubrication to start flowing. We're missing out on a really big opportunity there to actually, for the just practically the physical health of our bodies, for the fresh blood to come in and the old blood to leave, for the fresh lymph to come in, the old lymph fluid to leave, for the nervous systems to fire, to get chemicals flowing and things moving. It's like practically healthy to be fully aroused, let alone what it also does for the being and the psyche and the sexuality and the pleasure response that's possible for the female body. So often my question to my clients who come to me with pain or they don't orgasm is like, when's the last time you were fully aroused? And for a lot of them, it's like, never. Like, I've never experienced that. I don't know what that feels like in my body. And I'm like, yeah, I know. For a lot of us, it's a complete mystery to feel that full tissue swelling that's possible in the female body. And so when the question is like, how do we claim this for ourselves and ask for it, right? The hardest thing in the world is to ask for it, especially if you're with a partner who is, even if they're not saying it, but they're like letting you know that they think you take too long or they're frustrated or whatever that looks like, is to go, okay, but it's fully all about me and my health and my pleasure and just practically the health of my pelvic bowl and my genital organs, that I want them to be healthy and strong and juicy and tight until the day I die. And so I need full arousal in this. So I'm going to take my 45 minutes or whatever it is, you know, and I'm going to own that this pleasure comes from inside of me and this orgasm comes from inside of me as well. Like, just practically own it and then face all the other stuff that goes along with it, because I know that's easier said than done as well.
Wow. So another step. I'm brimming with steps, mainly, guys, because I do watch a lot of documentaries around this. I've always been fascinated about it. And also because I do a lot of homework, I want to understand more.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the stats are, what the exact percentages, but I remember it being over 50% of heterosexual women have never orgasmed and have definitely never orgasmed with a man.
Yeah, I think it's around 60%. Yeah.
Over 60%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, around
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like over 60% of heterosexual women have never orgasmed in the presence of a man. So I mean, full arousal, it's wild. So I guess the next thing that I want to ask is, for women that have never been fully aroused, how will they know that they are now in full arousal? Because I can imagine that this is no man's land if you've never been there.
Yeah.
If you've never been pleasured for 45 minutes or even longer before anything leads to penetrative sex,
Yeah.
how will you know?
This is the really difficult question, because like you said, if it's no man's land, if it's never been experienced, like, how do you know that you're having a physical experience if you've never felt it before? And I would say as well, for a lot of women, like, there's a lot of numbness that women themselves don't even realize they're carrying. Like, there can be so much going on. So I would say a couple of different things. The first is baby steps. If you have never like done the full 45-minute pleasure arousal, getting yourself like really ready, and you've been kind of stuck at the 5-minute mark or the 10-minute mark, if you're lucky, depending on your partner, up until now, go for an extra 5 minutes. Like, just like extend it a little bit and give your tissues time to catch up as well. You know, like give that tide of blood flow down into the microscopic tissues time to get down there. So each time you then have a pleasure session of whatever experience with yourself or with a partner, just extend it that little bit longer and explore a little bit more. And then the other thing you can do if you're really brave is have a look at yourself. And by yourself, I mean your vulva. Have a look at your vulva in the mirror in an unaroused state. And then have a look at yourself in a mirror as you become aroused. Or if it is possibly arousing for you, you can even watch yourself as you become aroused and watch the changes that happen in your body, and watch how your tissues begin to swell and how the wetness comes out and where your natural lubrication actually comes from, and explore, you know, for example, you can access the clitoral bulbs from underneath the labia. So explore that area. And there's so many different areas that we can explore for pleasure, and we tend to often just get stuck on the clitoris because it's easy, but there's so much waiting for us. And so it's almost like start going on dates with yourself as if you're meeting yourself for the first time, and you want to get you to know yourself and you want to develop a relationship with this part of your body, and start seeing what's possible slowly, slowly, and learn it as you go, and feel the emotions, because there's often a lot of emotion that comes up because this might be a completely unexplored area that's been like aching for your attention for the last however many decades. And so take your time with that as well, and let the feelings flow. Feel the feelings as you touch yourself without worrying that, oh my goodness, I'm self-pleasuring and I'm crying, there must be something wrong with me. No, you're just a human being having a human experience. Let it all flow and come back to your body and your pleasure in that way.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that we have been taught that self-pleasure, pleasure, or anything sexual should show up in a particular way.
Yes.
So I think that's also why women are under such intense pressure to fake an orgasm, because sex should look a particular way. It should feel a particular way. And when it doesn't, then you're the odd one out. But as I've been reflecting on it over the years, is that the more that we do that as women, the more that when men find a woman that is honest and shares the truth, then you become the freak, as opposed to this is normal. We all need to get educated on our bodies, the female bodies, how we operate together. So it keeps everything it keeps the status quo, basically, which is that, wow, every woman I've ever been with has orgasmed, you know? Wow. Well, that's not always true. You won't know until they actually told you the full, absolute truth. And we don't really talk about this. No. So this leads me down another path about how do you, can you explain how trauma, especially ancestral trauma, can manifest in women's experiences when it comes to our sexual experiences and our orgasmic experiences, and also our pleasure set points? Oh, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. So, okay, this is a good juicy one. All right, here we go. So I would say ancestral trauma, but also, okay, let's actually just redefine trauma in it for a moment in the way that I'm about to speak about it. Because I think for a lot of people, they hear the word trauma and they hear sexual abuse, and then they're like, well, I didn't have sexual abuse, so this doesn't relate to me. But let's talk a little bit differently about that. And I like to use the words misuse as well. Like abuse and misuse. And misuse can be from another person, obviously, through abuse or through other ways, but also misuse in that it actually didn't feel that good at the moment and we didn't speak up and go, hey, can you slow down or stop doing that or something. And so like our body was misused in that way. So it can be really like small things and big things. And there is an understanding that things that happen to us when in the first 7 years of life can actually get stored in the genitals as numbness, pain, shutdown, issues with sexuality. As you know, because you do Tantra, like that first chakra, this is what we're talking about, the base chakra, which is the one that comes online in those first 7 years. So experiences that you can have as a child that aren't sexual at all, if your body isn't able to fully experience a shock or a fright or something that came at your nervous system that wasn't able to be fully processed, if it can't be fully processed in the moment, the body has to store it up for later. It doesn't just go away. And it stores it up in the first 7 years of life in that first chakra, so in that pelvic bowl area, which means we can have genital stuff showing up. And it's like, but I don't understand why. Like, why do I have this pain? I wasn't abused or I didn't, And it's like, yeah. And it may have nothing to do with your sexuality, nothing to do with sex. It's just timing of an experience or multiple experiences that you had as a child that were stored in that way. So that's one good thing to know. Another good thing to know is our first sexual experiences, as in our penetration into our vagina experiences as women, are the ones that tell our bodies what to expect sex is. So that first sexual experience that we have sets us up first penetration experience, I should say, that first penetration experience that we have sets us up with an understanding of, oh, this is what sex is, or this is what intimacy is, or this is what happens when a naked man comes close to me. And I think for a lot of us, obviously, if it was sexual abuse, then absolutely horrendous imprint that can be worked through. So with full compassion, that is something that you can work to release from your body as well. But also for a lot of us that have just had like regular sexual first experiences, they may not have been great because the people we were with may not have known what they were doing. We sure didn't know. We didn't know what to ask for. And yet that's also what we're carrying around in our body, let alone, like you said, with ancestral stuff that can come through and can color the quality of our sexuality, of our way of expressing, whether you believe in the energetics coming through or the DNA coming through or just the practical. My mother is one and my grandmother are my ancestors, and their way of being in the world has imprinted me with an understanding of the way of being in the world as well. So we can just practically look at it like that as well. And all of this, as well as everything else, can show up in our genitals as pain, as numbness, as issues with sex, as behavior patterns. If we go to ourselves, you know what? I don't like the way that I showed up with that guy. I didn't speak up. I told myself I was going to speak up before I had sex with anybody else. And yet in the moment I froze and I couldn't speak up. So behavior patterns, and we feel like we're just stuck in them. And no matter what we choose, we keep on repeating the same pattern that isn't working for us. It can show up in also our choices of partners and our choices of lovers. It can really show up in so many different ways, and it can be so complex to unpack, and also not complex in a way as well, because it's us at the center of it, where our pleasure and our unfolding understanding of our own bodies is here at the center. But yeah, so it's such a complex question, Vangile. So I don't know, did that answer any of your questions about any of it, or was there something?
Actually, as you're talking, like the penny is dropping around why, when I do a lot of womb work for myself or with clients,
Yeah.
it's not always, most of the time, it's not sexual stuff that comes up from the womb.
No.
It's a lot of like stuff from childhood. So when you said the first 7 years,
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff is stored in the first chakra, and the
Yeah.
second chakra is sent. And for years, when I was struggling with my money stuff, it was my tailbone that carried the most of that. Like I could barely sit. It was so, so painful, until I started doing the work. And the more I did the work, like now, touch wood, haven't had tailbone stuff in a long time, right?
Yeah.
So it's been an aha moment listening to you. You explained it beautifully. So I want to go back to the question and just touch on pleasure set points, because this deeply ties to money and allowing money to be spent on us. How does that, like our ability to receive sexual pleasure or never having had sexual pleasure, how does that impact our finances and even how we receive pleasure in this world? And the one thing I want to say that comes to mind when I say that is just like how so many women are now waking up as the sexual revolution is also happening around. We've been taking the bare minimum in relationships and everything. How is all that interconnected?
Yes. Okay. Okay, there's two big areas. All right, let me talk to the first one first. Couple of questions. So, those of you that are listening, imagine yourself like just receiving pleasure from another person. Another person is there and they are focused on you. They're focused on your amazing body. You're receiving pleasure from them. Do you have a limit to the amount that you're allowed to have? Is there a voice in the back of your head that's going, I've taken too long now, I'm taking up too much space, I'm taking up too much time? Or are you able to just surrender? And if it takes 5 hours, it takes 5 hours. Or are you in the back of your mind also ticking off the to-do list of like, okay, let's get this job done. We've got other things that we need to go and do. So that's the first thing, is like, how much can you let in? So it's not just like your capacity to receive, although that's part of it as well, is like, how much are you limiting the movement of this through your body and your whole being's ability to be in the moment with this pleasure and with this beingness. So then there is also the receiving piece of, I guess, one step backwards. Like, can you let your intimate partners or your lovers or other people come towards you with an offering? Or in the back of your mind, are you going, oh my goodness, he's going to think I smell. He's going to think I taste weird. I didn't shave my legs. Oh my God, my pussy's hairy. Oh no, what's he going to think of the faces that I make and the noises that I make? And my body's too big and my body's too small and my labia are weird. He's going to think my labia are weird. Or can you actually like be there in the moment and let it come in and let it come towards you with whatever offering? And then it comes to self-pleasure as well. Like, is self-pleasure just like kind of a line item at the bottom of your to-do list that you kind of get to do in a hurry if you've ticked off everything else that day, if you've been a good girl and you've done all of the other jobs that you've given yourself or that life has given you, and then you're allowed to have a little bit of pleasure? Or is pleasure something that you can actually build into your day and feel as you go through your day? So that's the first thing, right? Like, what is your capacity to actually let this in? And the reason that it's important is because this pleasure energy, this sexual energy, this however you want to describe it or feel it for yourself, it's literally creation energy. It is literally the energy that will create another being for this planet if that's what you choose to do with your body. And that is literally the most powerful energy on the planet. All of the women here listening to this, just like pause for a moment and think about that. In your womb, in your genitals, in your pelvis, you are carrying the most powerful energy on the planet, which is the energy of creation. And we keep ourselves so small and we limit ourselves so much. When the truth is that if we really let this out to play, and I think we're taught to limit ourselves because people are afraid of what happens if we have a world of liberated women. This world looks very, very different from the world we're living in right now. And if we had a world of liberated women, can you imagine the men that we would choose or the partners that we would choose to worship at this temple that is actually our bodies, that is filled with the most powerful, the most beautiful energy on this planet that we just take for granted, or we dismiss, or we try not to think about, or, you know, we try to medicate, like hormonally medicate away because it's too much to think about. And I totally get it, you know, like unplanned pregnancies and all that, it's life disruptive, but at the same time, it's like power that we have here. And it comes back to what you asked as well about like taking a stand for ourselves. It's like, I think that's one of the stands we need to take for ourselves as well, of going, wow, I have the privilege of being in this body. I've got the privilege of having been incarnated in this physical body in this moment, walking this earth, and it's filled with the potential of life. We keep ourselves so small. We keep ourselves so afraid, only just enough. We scrape by. It's like we scrape by with everything. When we think that we are like a takeaway meal, when we're really like a 7-course dinner with matched wines, with somebody giving us a foot massage under the table, you know, like we can be everything here. And that's the truth of these bodies, but with great power comes great responsibility, and there can be a lot that comes with that as well, and it can bring up a lot. If you're listening to this and you're just like triggered and going, oh hell no, or triggered and going, oh hell no, I like terrifying or angry or whatever it is, like just ask yourself why. Like if this is true, maybe it is true, like what is keeping us from sticking our finger in the electric plug, you know, of this energy and letting it run through us?
Oh, wow. Really, really love this. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And this is the last question in regards to this particular thing that we've been on around pleasure. How have you seen the inability to hold pleasure or to cap our pleasure? How have you seen it impact women and our ability to allow money in?
Yeah. Yeah. My brain went in a different direction, so I'm just having to reprogram that. Let me go in the slightly different direction and come back in towards the money, because I think it's relevant. I've been working and speaking with a lot of women who are entering into menopause, because things can come up in menopause with the changes, and it can come up with changes in the genitals, which can suddenly be pain where there wasn't any, or dryness because the natural lubrication has just dried up, or, you know, that kind of situation can come up. And one thing that I ask, and it's a little bit cheeky, but it's a good question to ask, is it that if you're having sex and it's not feeling good in your body for whatever reason, is it that your body, that you don't like the sex? Or is it that you don't like the sex that you're currently having? Is it actually not a problem with your body, but is it a problem or an issue with the intimacy that is being provided for you? And in that as well, of course, with great responsibility, are you asking for what you want? And are you taking a stand for what you want and holding out for it. And this shows up not just with relationships. It's kind of easy to pinpoint relationships in a way, because if you're 45, 50, 55, 60, and you're really angry at your partner and your sex life is terrible, and, you know, so you can really go, well, yeah, okay. So is it an issue with your partner, or is there something else going on, or both, you know? But it also reflects in all of the ways. It reflects in the amount of like financial freedom that can flow in through our lives. It really shows itself in all of the ways in which we can receive. So, you know, one of the things, I think I already said it, is like life is a mirror. So life is always a mirror for us. Our outside world is always showing us what's going on in our inside world if we're willing to face it. And that can be a really difficult thing to do. But if your outside world is frustrating and dry and dried up and lacking juice and lacking joy and lacking experiences that turn you on and lacking pleasure, what's going on in your inside world if that's a reflection of that? Because I haven't met many women who were fully turned on and fully expressed and fully juicy and living their genital sexual pleasure and joy, who were also struggling to put meals on the table and struggling, you know, in those ways as well. Like the two do seem to go hand in hand. And I'm not saying, please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying if you can master your orgasm, all of a sudden the gold is going to fall from the sky, you know, and it's going to
Yeah.
come to bed, and then, like, because we're humans and we're complicated and it's so much more difficult than that. But, and what's your outside world telling you about your inside world at the moment?
Wow, I love this. And I love that you said, I'm not telling you that once you master your orgasm, you master your sexual pleasure, money's going to flow from the sky, because I've often heard that being the teachings. And and in my heart, I'm always like, oh my gosh, ancestral trauma is so much deeper than like you suddenly having a great orgasm and then money and life completely sorts itself out and resolves itself. There's so much more there. But I love that you spoke about that, because I have to agree with the external and the internal, right? And it's weird how that works in terms of money. Like what I found is when I center pleasure in my life, and everything is coming from, I'm doing the things I really love that turn me on, and I'm centering my pleasure in that, and I'm changing my wardrobe, and I'm just, going for it. I found that my finances resolve themselves beautifully, and I'm able to attract things. I mean, it also means like I'm doing the inner work to be able to make those changes so that I can hold those shifts in my nervous system. But that's a beautiful way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that. My next question is, I'm sure people are just dying to know more about your work at this point.
Yeah.
So can we just dive into that? Can you share any specific approaches or techniques that you use to help women overcome issues with pleasure and orgasm?
Yeah.
And also just, being more empowered in their bodies.
Yeah. Yes, I would love to. It's my favorite subject. Okay, so the way that I work with women is we take an approach that looks at what's going on in the body, like what's actually practically going on in the body. And then we look at history, past, what we were taught as children, for example, around sex, what our first sexual experiences were, that kind of thing, your actual practical life up to this point. And then the third thing that we look at is, what do you actually believe? that this means about you? What do you believe that this means about sex and pleasure and orgasm? And those three things, so the practical body, the practical history, and the belief patterns, are combined together into an approach that takes the whole being into consideration. There's a few things that are really good to know. And I think, you said you're a tantric yogi, is that right? So you will know all about this, which is we need to have a regulated nervous system in order to feel full pleasure in the body. And a regulated nervous system isn't something that just shows up for us because we want one. It does take work and dedication and showing up and choosing to breathe and choosing to be here and choosing to face the hard stuff, but also just doing practical things that can help the nervous system learn how to regulate itself. It can be one of the most powerful things that we can do. So if anybody's listening and they're like, I have no idea what she's even talking about, I would say, like, start with things like find yourself yoga, find yourself qigong, find yourself tai chi, find yourself some kind of meditation that really helps and really works for you, because different stuff works for all of us. I'm a qigong person. You sound like you're a yoga person. Like there's different stuff for all of us. Or doing like vagus nerve reset, vagus nerve supporting practices, or seeing an alternative practitioner with a focus on nervous system regulation, or whatever it's going to take to regulate these nervous systems, because a regulated nervous system isn't just needed so that we don't have pain or we don't have numbness or we don't have like no orgasm when we want one. A regulated nervous system is necessary so that we can feel the full pleasure of the experience and we can let it flow through us. So it's it's easy. Again, it's one of those things that's easy for me to say, and it takes time and it's harder to do, but it is worth doing if it hasn't even occurred to you before. Like, investigate what's available in your area. And the second thing is, and this is really easy, Vangile, in a way, and for some it's not so easy, but our breath is one of the most powerful tools that we own, and we're carrying it around with us, and we do it unconsciously most of the time, but it's something that we can really utilize, because breath can be used not only to regulate the nervous system, it can be used to fully relax and open the pelvis and the pelvic floor and the genitals. It can be used to support the body to learn how to bring all the blood and the juices down to the genitals so that they can fully open and respond in pleasure. And it can be used to enhance pleasure, to grow pleasure, to make it bigger in our bodies, and to move that pleasure around our bodies if having more than just a clitoral or a vaginal or like a genital orgasm is something that we're interested in. If we want to play in all of the different orgasmic areas, we can use our breath to support that kind of orgasmic exploration to happen as well, or the orgasmic opening up of the body. And it's not just regular breathing that we're talking about. We are talking about specific breathing into the belly and different ways of engaging the pelvis as we breathe. That is really important. So working with somebody who can support you with pelvic breathing or belly breathing, or it's got names like rose breathing or flower breathing and things like that as well. And there's lots of people out there who can support this, or I can support this online to learn how to to utilize breath, because it's incredibly powerful, to the point where I've got a little story for you. I had a client and she had literally a half an hour session with me, and she had periods that were so crippling in their pain that she knew that she was likely to pass out, and she'd been hospitalized because the pain she'd been completely unconscious on the floor from the pain. And this had happened every single month. And I saw her, I believe she was in her late 40s. And so we're talking at least 20 years of monthly experience of this amount of pain. I taught her how to breathe into her pelvis, and she messaged me and went, I didn't have any pain this month. And then she messaged me the next month and went, I still haven't had any pain. She just stopped having period pain. She learned how to breathe. and she stopped having 20 years worth of crippling agony. That's the power that we can get from our breath. And also it's like life comes into us through the breath as well. So it can also be, I mean, we could probably talk about breath for about 3 hours as well. I know, Vangile, so let's just leave it at that one. But
I love it. Breath work is one of the techniques that I use. I absolutely adore it.
Yeah.
It's really, really fantastic.
Yeah. Really,
Oh,
really.
wow. Thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing. My second last question is, how do you create a safe space and a supportive environment for women to explore and heal their sexual traumas? And also, well, I guess this is a two-in-one as well, one of my many questions. How can we in relationships create that space with our partners?
Yeah, beautiful question. The thing I would say, let's start with the partners, is when we're in a partnership with another person, I believe we have a responsibility to work on ourselves, as does the partner. So both parties, or all of the parties in a relationship, actually have a responsibility to work on themselves so that the way that they show up for the other person is the healthiest version of themselves. I don't believe in giving the partner the worst of ourselves, which I think happens in a lot of relationships. There's a face that's put on out there in the world, and then we come home and we relax, and then it, like, the truth comes out. It's actually not okay. For me, that's a really important one. We have a responsibility to ourselves and this person that we say we love to be the best versions of ourselves. And part of that is we have a responsibility to learn how to regulate our own nervous systems to the best of our abilities, because life still happens, so that we don't make an unregulated nervous system our partner's problem as well. And by unregulated nervous system, what I'm talking about there is, like, do you just find yourself screaming and yelling and you just are like, what am I doing? Why am I responding like this? Or do you find yourself saying things in ways that, if you actually take a deep breath and are honest about it and go, wow, I don't actually think that that is the way that I would talk to somebody I loved. And you're like, but I love them and it's still coming out of me and I can't stop it from coming out of me. Or do you have behaviors that are just, you know that they're not healthy for you or your partner and they're just continuing to happen? There's something going on, and it's our responsibility to take care of that. And so in that, I would say, like, the reason that I can create a safe space for my women to show up and for my women to heal is because I take responsibility for my own nervous system as well, in a professional capacity as well. The most important thing that I can offer a client is actually the understanding of what a regulated nervous system feels like, because we have mirror neurons in the brain. So we are community creatures. We are social creatures. We are built to constantly be picking up information from all of the people and the beings around us. And so if you're in a group of people and everybody's calm and everybody is just chill, it's quite likely that you're also going to be calm and chill. Like, it's just our nervous system naturally will do that. It's not always the case, because sometimes that the extreme response of kind of like that nervous system response can take over anyway. But the more and more that we can bring ourselves down back into our bodies, fully here, fully with our nervous systems kind of calm and receptive and regulated, the more that the people around us are going to be feeling that and picking up on that. You know, those people that you just naturally are like, wow, I just feel so good when I'm around them, and I don't know what it is. What it is their nervous systems most of the time.
Yeah.
No, what it is that they're regulated. And it's like, oh, the pressure has just come off my body that I don't need to both care for myself and the other people that I'm around and make sure that all of us are kind of calm in this moment. Everyone's taking care of themselves. And the relaxation that brings to the system is like the greatest gift. I love it. I have my favorite people who self-regulate, who do the work, and I just love being around them. It's such a gift and it feels different. And I'm not like pointing fingers at people who are not feeling regulated in their nervous system or showing behaviors that they're not, because we're also not taught this stuff. Like how to take care of your own nervous system health isn't something that's taught. But it's really something that's really worth learning. And the good thing about it for being a woman, well, I think it's good, is that it can often be fun. We can use movement, we can use dancing, we can use like that kind of expression of our body in order to come back to ourselves and in order to help our nervous systems become. It doesn't have to be sitting down on the mountain for an hour a day silently with my eyes closed chanting, you know, like that works for men more often than it does for women. We need to be in these bodies. We need to be using these bodies and feeling these bodies in order to regulate. So that's what I would say for both partners and for my clients. We have a responsibility as a human and as part of being the best version of ourselves.
Wow, Naomi, that was such a beautiful way to answer that question. What you said about we have a responsibility to be our best selves for our partners. I also believe that. I really believe that. I believe that this is also why I make sure I do my work on a daily basis, at least on a daily basis, as often as possible in a week, because I feel like I want to be my best self in my relationship or with my friends. And I also agree that people like we co-regulate to people's nervous systems.
Yeah.
So when we're around people who are dysregulated, it will dysregulate us. And the more sensitive you are, the more likely you are to go absolutely haywire with people's regulated nervous systems. You may find yourself acting completely out of character, screaming and shouting because you're around people whose nervous systems are so completely dysregulated, and your nervous system, especially if you haven't had to learn how to regulate around complete chaos, your nervous system may completely just go haywire and you won't be able to cope. Which is that whole thing that people talk about with abusers, that when people have been in situations where they've been abused, the abuser can come, like they can end up looking, the abused can end up looking like the abuser, because people don't know the backstory, but the abuser has learned how to feign regulation in public, but you haven't yet. And this is new to you. So this is also interesting in terms of like getting out there and understanding nervous system regulation and understanding how we what we need in order to feel safe and to feel regulated.
Totally.
That being said, wow, Naomi, you've given us so much. Thank you for your generosity and your time. My final question is to ask you, how do people get hold of you? How do they contact you? Do you have anything that you want to offer the audience? Feel free, guys. Follow Naomi. As you can hear, she is a wealth of knowledge. Honestly, amazing.
Yes, come and talk to me. And I say it often, Vangile, like nothing really shocks me anymore. Like I've heard a lot of stories over my time, right? And so like if you're sitting at home going, I want to reach out to for help, but oh my God, what is she going to think of me? I'll probably think, oh yeah, okay, well, let's talk about it. It's probably going to be the thought. So really that's on my website. You can click the button and book in to have a chat with me if there is something that you want to talk about. I also offer, like I said, I offer these monthly free online classes. We've got one coming up. I don't know when you're releasing this, but next week, which will be the middle of July, I'm running one on sexual pain and numbness and shutdown. And then I also run them on sexual confidence. I run them on like all of the juicy topics, orgasms, that kind of thing. So if you sign up on my website to any of my free gifts, you just automatically get told about those classes, but I'm also on the social medias, so I'm all over the place. So yeah, just come and find me.
Oh, I love it. Can you please give us your social media handles and give us
Yes.
the link to your website?
Yes. So I
That's as
yeah.
well, guys.
Okay. So I'm the Pleasure Naturopath. So it's www.thepleasurenaturopath.com. And you can find me on Instagram, _ sensual freedom _ is what I am over there as well. That's probably the easiest ways to find me. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you so much, Naomi. This topic was amazing.
It was
I
so
loved it.
fun. Thank you.
It was so awesome. And thank you so much, Money Magicians, for staying with us, just listening to this. As usual, I'm so grateful for you guys. And if you loved what this podcast episode had to share, please, if you're listening on YouTube, drop us messages in the comment section. Feel free to email me if you're on my mailing list. Just click reply. Let me know your thoughts. Follow Naomi, but also more than anything, if you're listening on Apple, if you're listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean, I think you can also leave comments. You can definitely leave comments on Podbean, but leave us ratings on Spotify and on Apple. The better the ratings, guys, the more I can get more amazing podcast guests to come talk to us about great topics and how they link to money and trauma. And please do leave us a review and do share this topic. Share it with your significant other. Share today's podcast with your friends, with your family members. Have conversations. This is the whole base of these podcasts. Please share, spread the word. And again, if you guys are looking for insights on working on your ancestral money, look in the description section below. I do have my 7-day free tapping into ancestral money wisdom training. The link is in the description. And as usual, I do have one-on-one coaching. So check that out. All the links are in the description. I will see you guys again in the next Money Magic episode. It's going to be a juicy one as well. Thank you guys. And thank you, Naomi, once more.
Thank you, Vangile.